Welcome to First Congregational Church in Guilford, Connecticut, where we say whoever you are and wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. And we've been practicing saying that you are wanted here, you are loved here, and you belong here. We keep extending the welcome and the hospitality, for we know that we all receive it in different ways. And as we prepare for worship this morning, we have a guest preacher for today, Reverend Milton Brasher-Cunningham, who happens to be my spouse, and pastors in Hamden, Connecticut will be offering our sermon. As we prepare for this time of worship, I invite you to pause for a moment and just reflect. Listen to the Spirit as we feel called to hear these words, to pray, and to interact. Roll our shoulders back and open our hands, our hearts, and our minds as we prepare for worship. During the month of March, we're going to take 15 minutes in between the 8:30 service and the 10 o'clock service, the one that's live, and have people pray as we continue in a visioning for our congregation. Visioning meaning, where is our ministry leading us? How do we see our ministry connecting with the needs of the world around us? And as a habit, we're going to work on this 15 minutes, just 15 minutes, to settle ourselves and prepare for the words that are to come. Today we're talking about discipleship. May that be part of our conversations too and our wonderings as we continue forward. Hear now the text from Luke. One day, Jesus was standing beside the lake when the crowd pressed around him to hear his word, to hear God's word. Jesus saw two boats sitting by the lake. The fishermen had gone to share and to fish, and they were washing their nets. And Jesus boarded one of the boats that belonged to Simon. Then he asked him to row out a little distance from the shore. And then he said, row out a little more. Jesus sat down and he taught the crowds from the boat. When he finished speaking to them and to the crowds, he looked around and said to Simon, row out farther into the deep water and drop your nets there for a catch. Simon replied, we've worked hard all night and we've caught nothing. But because you say so, I'll drop the nets. So they dropped the nets, and their catch was so huge their nets were splitting. They signaled for their partners to come from other boats and to help them. They filled both the boats full, and they were about to sink. When Simon Peter saw the catch, he fell at the knees of Jesus and said, leave me, Lord, for I am a sinner. Peter and those who were with him were overcome with amazement because of the number of fish that they caught. James and John and John's sons, Simon was there, their partners, and they were all amazed too. Jesus said to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on, you will be fishers for people. As soon as they brought the boats to the shore, they left everything and they followed Jesus. May God grant us wisdom and understanding to this passage.
In my days as a high school English teacher, one of the books I loved to read with students was Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. I won't say that all the ninth graders in my classes enjoyed reading the book, but I loved it because it presented such a simple and vivid picture of the old man, Santiago, chasing the big fish. Still, they had a point. It's not easy to describe that kind of struggle in a way that the reader can really get it, especially when none of us had been in Santiago's situation. A fair part of the story takes place after the fish is hooked, and it's dragging Santiago's small boat while the old man hangs on, waiting for the fish to exhaust itself. One day, a boy in one of the classes was vocal in his frustration with how long it was taking the whole thing to drag out. He's just sitting in the boat, he said. So the next day I came to class with a big coil of rope and asked him to stand up. I secured one end of the rope to a heating pipe in the corner of the room and then tied the other around his waist and asked him to lean back so that the rope was taut, much the same way that Santiago had to keep his line taut so the fish wouldn't break it. The old man did this for a couple of days, I said. I want you to do it for 40 minutes. He was up for the challenge, but he couldn't last. He still didn't like the story much, but he understood the old man better. I tell you that story because I think we have to remind ourselves how different life was in first century Galilee compared to the world we know. That seems obvious, I know, but when we read that the would-be disciples were out fishing all night, we have to work hard to picture the small hand-carved boats in which they sailed, or the rough ropes that made their nets, or even that they were not independent business people, but peasants who did grueling work and saw little of their profits. We should also remember that the men in the boats were not strangers to Jesus. They were with him in Nazareth when he preached, and his other stops across Galilee. In the verses preceding this, Jesus went to Simon Peter's house and even healed his grandmother. This is not a story about Jesus calling these people to do something they hadn't thought about. Still, someone is changed in this story. They had continued to go to work, it seems, until now, even though they were walking with Jesus. And Jesus got in the boat first because he needed a little distance from the crowds, and he wanted to be able to preach to them in comfort. Simon and the others were cleaning up from having fished all night, which was the usual shift for fishers in the area. They'd come back to port with empty nets, which was probably not that unusual because the pressure from the Roman government for product meant that the lake was overfished. Jesus finished his sermon and told them to sail out farther and drop their nets. Simon must have rolled his eyes and responded with the Aramaic equivalent of, "You got to be kidding me, boss." But he did as Jesus asked and dropped the nets. And when they pulled them up, they were so full that they were a problem. The nets were ripping and the boats were sinking, and they barely made it back to shore with their record catch. And it frightened them. They didn't know what to say or do. Jesus said, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you'll capture people." It's a word, the Aramaic word catch there means to take them alive or to enthrall, the way we talk about being taken by a photograph or a dramatic performance or piece of music. Luke says they walked away, leaving the big pile of fish for whoever was still on the docks, and they went with Jesus. We could even say they were taken, captured by what he said and did. Luke makes it sound so simple. They dropped everything and went with him. But they were allowing Jesus to change their whole view of the way the world worked. They lived in a world of scarcity. There weren't enough fish. There wasn't enough money. They were oppressed by Rome. They were accustomed to looking at the world and feeling trapped. Jesus said, "Try again. Throw the nets out one more time." And with that came an image of abundance, more fish than they could reasonably harvest. I wonder if it made any of them think of Jesus' sermon in Nazareth when he had quoted from Isaiah, "The Spirit of God is upon me, because God has anointed me to preach good news to the poor, to proclaim release to the prisoners and recovery of sight to the blind, to liberate the oppressed, and to proclaim the good year of God's favor." And then Jesus said, "Today you're seeing these words become flesh right before you." Luke wants us to make the connection in the way he describes the turn of events. Jesus was calling for spiritual, social, and even economic upheaval when he proclaimed the Jubilee, the year of God's favor. Jesus calls us to trust the extravagance of God, to trust that there's enough to share, that we are enough to take care of each other. And that's not a pipe dream. Even now, with 8 billion people on the planet, we grow enough food in the world to feed everyone. The reasons people starve have to do with our broken systems that enforce a sense of scarcity and conflict. We have the ability to catch everyone if we were to unclench our fists and open our hearts. Which takes me back to high school English. 10th grade this time. The book is Catcher in the Rye. In one of my favorite passages, Holden Caulfield says to his sister Phoebe, "You know that song, 'If a Body Catch a Body Coming Through the Rye'?" And she interrupts him to tell him that he's remembering the line from the Robert Burns poem incorrectly. It was, "If a body meet a body." And Holden says, "Well, I thought it was, if a body catch a body." Anyway, I keep picturing all these little kids playing some game in this big field of rye and all, thousands of little kids, and nobody's around, nobody big. I mean, except me. And I'm standing on the edge of some crazy cliff. And what I have to do, I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff. I mean, if they're running and they don't look where they're going, I have to come out of somewhere and catch them. That's all I do all day. I just be the catcher in the rye. Part of the reason the people in Jesus' time were looking for a Messiah was they were convinced they were living in the last days and things couldn't get worse. Sound familiar? That perspective has been true for most every generation. We think we're last because we're newest. The 8 billion people alive on our planet today represent a fraction of the 117 billion humans who have walked the earth. All of us have been in the same boat, wondering how we will make it through or who will save us from all of this. And God's message to us remains constant. There is enough. Enough food, enough room, enough love. There is enough if we will only catch each other. Amen.
Hush, hush, somebody calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like Jesus. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? I'm so glad that trouble don't last always. I'm so glad that trouble don't Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall